Well, time now to find out what the latest is in the Harvey Weinstein case. As you know, it's been underway in downtown Manhattan for a number of weeks now. And as you probably know, our very own Jesse Weber has been there right now outside the courthouse, where today we heard or at least he heard, the prosecution's closing argument to put together in his head with the defense closing. You know, Jesse, earlier today, I did declare that Weinstein had been found guilty of being a first-degree sleazebag. But does that mean he's going to be found guilty of being a rapist and a predatory guy that's going to go to prison for the rest of his life? How'd the closings go for the prosecution today?
Well, you know, Michael, we always say that the justice system is a lot different. There are people who want Harvey Weinstein behind bars, but it's the question, did the state meet their burden? Can they prove beyond a reasonable doubt? Prosecutor Joan Aluzzi-Arborn actually believes that she does have that case. She delivered a fiery closing argument where she described that Harvey Weinstein is a violent rapist who treated these women as disposables, continuously using tricks and surprises to isolate his victims and ultimately sexually assault them. And using tricks and surprises can never be consent. She said that these women have absolutely nothing to gain by coming forward and testifying about these embarrassing details, unlike what the defense says, where they have an opportunity for financial motive or to get fame or anything like that, but they are compelled by their own morality. She said that unlike other crimes, sex crime victims are put under this microscope and they're kind of blamed for, what did you do? Why did you go to that apartment? Why did you go to that hotel? But she made it very clear, just because you do something like that, just because you go to a hotel room with a man or you go to his apartment, doesn't mean that you're looking for sex, and it doesn't mean that you're asking to be sexually assaulted. She moved on to the different accusers in this case, started with Annabella Shora, and she tried to fill in a lot of the gaps about how Harvey Weinstein came up to that apartment. She told a theory about how that was possible, and she said that, look, he went up there, he raped her, and what I really want to highlight is when prosecutor Aluzzi said that, Harvey Weinstein wanted Annabella Shore investigated even before she went public with her claims. In other words, why would he care about her? Why would he care about this unless, of course, he did something wrong? Moving on to Miriam Haley. Prosecutor Aluzzi said that this was a vulnerable girl that Harvey Weinstein took advantage of, that she came to his apartment back in 2006, the time that she claimed she was sexually assaulted, not because she was looking for sex that night, but merely to try to mend a professional relationship that kind of had a few bumps in the road. Moving on to Jessica Mann. Prosecutor Aluzzi said that this relationship over time with Harvey Weinstein was never consensual. It was filled with fear and pressure. And even if you believe that she liked him, even if you believe that she loved him, he had no right to rape her in 2013. Moving on to the three Molyneux witnesses, Prosecutor Aluzzi said despite what the defense says, they have always been consistent with their statements, and if they accepted invites to parties or events at behalf of Weinstein or Weinstein's company, that was their job. It was work, and they shouldn't be blamed for not telling their stories initially or not remembering their stories initially. She also took hits at the defense and from the defense's closing yesterday. I'll just mention one right here. As you recall, Donna Rotuno kept stressing how many of these women lawyered up, while Prosecutor Aluzzi said that was what they're supposed to do. If they're going to testify, wouldn't they like to have a lawyer to navigate their way through this process? And look at Harvey Weinstein. Here's a guy who has 5 attorneys from different states. Now, that is just a quick summation of the prosecution's summation today, but I will tell you it was a powerful one.
I'll bet. And Jesse, you're in a unique position where you were in the courtroom and saw both the defense closing yesterday and the prosecution today. Let me ask you if you can do this. First of all, tough question. Did anyone win the day in your mind? Was it even? How did it shake out in your mind?
In my mind, at this point, this case is littered with doubt. It might even be littered with reasonable doubt. The question is, did the prosecution meet their burden beyond a reasonable doubt? And that's the question. Look, I think at this point, there are more holes in Jessica Mann's account than there are in Miriam Haley's account. I wouldn't be surprised if Harvey Weinstein is acquitted with respect to the 2 rape charges on Jessica Mann. Miriam Haley is a much tougher story. Despite what I just said, what the prosecutor Aluzzi had said today, let's not forget what Donna Rotuno said about Miriam Haley, that really she knew what she was doing. This is a woman who has common sense. This is a woman who did make her choice. They were in a relationship. If you look at her calendar, there were hearts all over the place. There were scribbles out. Maybe she was trying to hide information. And she asked this jury, use your New York City common sense. Why would a woman in Miriam Haley's position go to Harvey Weinstein's apartment late at night alone after this is a guy who allegedly barged into her apartment, after he invited her to Paris and she felt uncomfortable about that, after he inappropriately asked her for a massage? She knew what he was about. So you're just going to go to his apartment knowing all these things? Oh, and then let's not forget what Donna Rotuno said too. Miriam Haley was so nervous that the driver who dropped her off was in on it, was in on this sexual assault. Yet the next day she takes a trip on the Weinstein Company dime, and goes to the airport using a Weinstein Company driver. So how afraid really was she? These are all questions that the jury is going to ultimately have to think about when they go to deliberations on Tuesday. So at this point, I would say regarding the two main witnesses, it seems to be a stronger case for the prosecution regarding Miriam Haley. And as far as Annabella Shura, again, I feel there are possibly many holes in that account, given how it's 27 years ago. But given the account of Annabella Shura, she was very strong and compelling on the stand. So I'm not sure which way the jury is going to go with that account.
Yeah, and of course we can never second guess them, but your perspective is better than most. You're right there, and you know what the process is about. Let me ask you this, Jesse, and if there's a way to apportion this, maybe there is, maybe there isn't. Seems to me there was a lot made by the prosecution of this build-up to the first event, really trying to say, hey, you can't blame a victim because they were social, and all of these things happened prior to the event. And I don't think anybody does that anymore. I think that's old school thinking. That's thinking that a husband can't rape a wife or that a prostitute can't be raped. I don't think there is a stigma with having connections to a guy that maybe you're not attracted to, and then there's an event. The problem is the after event connections. Did the prosecution spend enough time, in your opinion, dealing with that?
Yeah, look, this is a trial. One of the reasons it's so important is it's kind of defining what is consent. It's defining what was the industry norm. It's defining what these relationships are like. And look, the biggest problem, as you said, Michael, for the prosecution is trying to define this behavior. Especially look at Jessica Mann. Did she appear to act as someone who was raped by Harvey Weinstein? Did Miriam Haley act as someone who was sexually assaulted by Harvey Weinstein? What Prosecutor Aluzzi tried to do today was say, it doesn't take away the fact that these women were scared. They were fearful of Harvey Weinstein. He had so much power. It's not a surprise that they didn't report it. And yes, they would go to parties, they would go to events because they had to. That was their job. It doesn't take away from the fact what was going on internally. They maybe tried to bury it. They relied heavily on Dr. Barbara Ziv's testimony, this forensic psychiatrist who was tasked with dispelling these rape myths about what rape victims are supposed to do and not do. And yes, the big theory here is that someone can be raped, and then have a consensual relationship with that person. Someone could be raped and yet still have contact with that person. Someone could be raped and still write loving emails to that person. It doesn't change the fact about what happened on those specific nights and times in 2006 and 2013.
Yeah, there's no doubt, Jesse, Dr. Ziv is so important for the prosecution's case because, in my opinion, that's what this case hinges on. If we take away the overlay of the Me Too movement and whatever public pressures might be felt by these jury members, they're going to have to look at Dr. Ziv's explanation as to why these people would have continued romantic-like contact with their rapist. That's a big hurdle, and I think that's where this case is going to pivot one way or the other. Hey, Jesse, appreciate your time out there. Again, the copious notes, very helpful, doing a fine job with that, and we know that you'll be out there next week. The jury gets instructed and starts deliberating Tuesday. Of course, you'll be all over that as usual, and we do appreciate it. Thanks, buddy. Get out of the cold there. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it. I'll see you soon.
So, okay, guys, let's take a quick break. We got more to talk about here in Weinstein because there were some little mini pressers that took place after today's closing arguments by the prosecution. We will see those, chat with my guests about that when we come right back to Law and Crime.